Hello and welcome to StarNet Link, and today's topic discussion is sacred geometry. So once we start getting into more of the Starseed community and spiritual community, you'll start to hear people who on their advanced spiritual work start to talk about sacred geometry. Sacred geometry has been around for a very, very long time. The most notable where you actually see and sacred geometry mostly points to all the Hindu temples in India. And then also you will also see sacred geometry things in Buddhist culture or in Buddhists who do these very beautiful elaborate mandalas, and each mandala has their own sacred meaning and what they mean to that individual or group of individuals, or for other people who can witness the beautiful artwork of these mandalas. Sacred geometry has mostly has been connected to a way of light language and automatic writing. Once you start doing more research into higher dimensionals and more on the higher dimensional range, some beings do not speak with physical voice. Sometimes they speak telepathically, and sometimes they don't speak at all, and so they sometimes communicate through sacred geometries or sacred symbols, or what a lot of starseeds will talk about is called angel numbers. And the most notable thing when it comes to sacred geometry, especially when you start going into ufology, ufology has some great research about crop circles. Ufology and the Starseed community believe that crop circles are a way of our galactic neighbors to communicate to us and give the public or the general public clues into how to advance our science, mathematic, or spiritual journey, not only as an individual but as the human race, or as the human race culture, to advance our knowledge in these areas. The six most common sacred geometry that I think that a lot of beginner starseeds should know or start to be curious about or want to learn more about sacred geometries are these most six common ones that you'll start to hear in the spirituality starseed community. So the first one is the egg of life, the fruit of life, the seed of life, the tree of life, the germ of life, and the Menatron cube. And I will give a visual aid of what those actually look like. So as you can see, these are what sacred geometry mostly points to. The seed of life mostly points to the generous pattern that you see when an egg forms in life. It's universal and is often used as a symbol of creation of thought and creation itself. So these are just the visual aid of what those basic six sacred geometry looks like. And then I'm going to give a visual aid of what crop circles look like. So here's a visual aid of different crop circles, and as you can see how detailed, intricate they are. And this is the reason why a lot of ufologists believe that these are clues into helping us advance as a society through these sacred geometry symbols that have been popping up over in recent decades. There is a crop circle database that you can actually go online and see all the different crop circles over the past couple of decades. They have been creating a database and recording all of these sacred geometry or symbols that they get from our galactic neighbors. There is a lot of conspiracy about different crop circles and what they could actually mean. But it's very interesting that a higher society greater than our own would communicate in this form. And to some people who are in ufology, believe that the reason why they do this is to get us to be more curious, but to also as a way of, in a more peaceful tone, because if you understand it from their logical standpoint, showing up in physical form, like in a fleet, or the showing up in the capital or world cities, it will look like they are invading us. So as a way to not be shown as an invasive or a negative force, they tried to show their, in a sense, creative side, to show that they are peaceful and they want to teach us. But also a lot of people do believe that these symbols are also messages for other races that are coming to Earth. So it's really interesting once you start getting into the whole history of sacred geometry and looking at how not only as they are used as a form of communication, but they're also used for mathematical formulas, science, and also even computer programming as well. And it's really, really fascinating, interesting once you start to dive into more of sacred geometry. So my thoughts and opinion. I do believe and I do think that a lot of starseeds need to know this, especially in the UFOlogy. Once you start digging into sacred geometry, you will notice that a lot of sacred geometry symbols or stuff connected to mandalas have been used in a negative way in human history. And a lot of these symbols used to mean very positive and wonderful things, but due to the atrocities and history that have been associated with these symbols, some of these symbols can mean one thing to one person in one nation and mean another thing in another nation. And sometimes these symbols can be rooted in racism, oppression, and other negative connotations that were not meant to mean that. And so when people start to do research and understanding, that people need to be aware of that certain symbols were used in a negative way, but they were never intended to be used in a negative way, because a lot of people didn't understand the importance of these symbols for these cultures. And even to this day, certain cultures around the world are even banned or prohibited to even use these symbols and to even talk about them or teach them to their own people, because of cultural backlash in modern state media using these symbols as a way of negative connotations or negative things. So just be aware of that once you start doing research about sacred geometry, to be aware that some of these symbols are rooted in very negative ways. But as we start to educate people more about spirituality and these symbols, we're hoping to, in a sense, teach people that these symbols are not evil. It's just that time period has changed, and understanding our history and understanding our knowledge from the past can really help us solve future issues that pop up in the future. Sacred geometry is very, very interesting and very, very beautiful. Once you start doing research in mandalas, you'll start to see how intricate, and you'll start to see a pattern among different cultures around the world that have the same symbol but is in different formats or different styles, sort of like when you're typing in a computer. There's different fonts that you can do or different styles of typing, and it's the same thing with geometry symbols, that in one culture they have this format of how they present their sacred geometry and their sacred symbols, but also in another culture have the same symbol and it has their way of interpreting it as well. So in a sense, if you look at sacred geometry as a whole, you start to see it as a universal language, not just for physical speaking, but more on the aspect of math, computer analysts, computer programming, all wrapped in one, in just these basic and beautiful sacred geometry symbols. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Leave them below. And thank you so much for watching my videos.